Please welcome to the stage ALEC National Chairman, Florida Representative Demi Basada.
Thank you. If everyone wants to go ahead and take their seats, Florida definitely showed up, as we do. All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. We'll try that one more time. Good morning. Much better. Welcome to the 2026 annual meeting of the American Legislative Exchange Council. My name is Demi Basada. I'm a state representative from Miami-Dade County and the great state of Florida. And I have the honor of serving as your 2026 national chair. I have to say it feels a little surreal standing up here. Last year, I sat in the audience watching Senator Rucker take the podium, and I remember thinking this is going to be a tough act to follow. And for those of you keeping score from last year, because most of us usually are keeping score, Speaker Huston in Indiana, as well as our Texas delegation, including ALEC board member Senator Phil King and Representative Caroline Harris-Davila, raised the bar with a record-breaking annual meeting and States and Nation Policy Summit in Texas. Well, Florida heard you. We've been taking notes, we've been making calls, and we intend to show you exactly what the free state of Florida can do when we set our minds to something. Consider this fair warning. We broke all of the records and set a new all-time fundraising record for an ALEC national conference. That's quite the achievement, if I do say so myself. Thank you to our Florida host committee, including Representative Dana Trabolsi and Representative Jennifer Kincart-Johnson, and our Florida private sector partners for making this happen. And a special thank you to JP Morgan Chase and the James Madison Institute for supporting this conference and this evening's welcome reception. Speaking of raising the bar, back in 2023, who was here in 2023 at this same property? All right, so some of you are returning members. The last time this meeting was here in Orlando, our national chair was Danny Perez, the current Speaker of the Florida House. Anyone who was at that meeting remembers what he built that week. And honestly, every chair since then has been chasing it a little bit. Danny couldn't be with us today, and there's a pretty good reason why. President Trump has nominated him to serve as the next U.S. ambassador to Brazil. So while we're here talking about raising the bar in Florida, Danny's out there getting ready to raise it for the entire country in Brasilia. Congratulations, Danny. We're all so proud of you, and we're watching your confirmation process. But Danny's story is a good introduction to understand why we're gathered here. This state has a way of producing people and policy that end up shaping the entire country. So it is a great privilege to welcome you all to Florida. This state was built by people who came here to find opportunity to raise their families in freedom. That's not just our brand, it's who we are. And it makes it the perfect home for this meeting, because that is exactly what ALEC stands for: limited government, free markets, and federalism. Principles that built Florida and principles that continue to make America great. And what a year to be gathering. This year, our nation marked 250 years since the founding fathers pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to the cause of liberty. That milestone belongs to all of us in this room, because the freedoms we celebrate this year are the same ones we fight to protect in our states every single day. Before we go any further, I'd like us to pause and center ourselves the way we always do at ALEC, with prayer. Please join me in welcoming Florida Representative Erica Booth to lead us.
Thank you. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together today. We are grateful for the opportunity to gather in fellowship, to build relationships, and to work toward the good of the people we are called to serve. We ask for your wisdom to guide every leader in this room, from Florida and from across the nation. Give us discernment in our decisions, humility in our service, and the courage of Daniel to stand firm in our convictions, to lead with integrity, and to remain faithful to what is right, even when it's difficult. Lord, we lift up every elected official, public servant, and their families. Protect them, encourage them, and give them peace. Bless the spouses, children, and loved ones who faithfully support them behind the scenes. Strengthen them and remind them that their sacrifices matter. Bless this meal, the conversations we share, and the work that lies ahead. May we seek wisdom over pride, service over self, and always striving to make a positive difference in the lives of those we are entrusted to serve. This in your holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Erica. Now, would you please rise and join us as we welcome University of Central Florida School of Performing Arts voice professor and opera director Thomas Potter to perform our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
That was amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. And if you'd remain standing, hand over your heart and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please take your seats. As your national chair, I have the privilege this week of reporting on a truly remarkable year for this organization. ALEC members have been busy in state houses and communities all across this country doing the hard work of turning principle into policy. We've seen education freedom continue its march across America. We've seen tax reform, energy policy, and election integrity wins piling up state by state. And we've seen this organization, our task forces, our academies, our network of legislators and private sector partners growing stronger every single day. That's what makes this week so exciting, because the conversations we have here, the ideas we exchange, the relationships we build, they don't stay in this room. They go home with you. They become policy. They become better lives for the people that you represent. Now, to kick things off, I'm proud to welcome two leaders who know exactly what it looks like when free market principles meet bold leadership right here in Florida. Bob McClure was actually with us here in Orlando 3 years ago when ALEC last gathered in this state, and in the time since, working alongside Speaker Steve Crisafulli and the Florida legislature, we've watched Florida rack up win after win on education, on taxes, on regulatory reform. That partnership is a big part of why we are back this year. We don't just want to celebrate what's happened here. We want every one of you to take it home and put it to work in your states. Please join me in welcoming James Madison Institute President and CEO Bob McClure and former Florida Speaker of the House, Steve Crisafulli.
Thank you, Demi. Thank you all so much for being here. I want to welcome everybody, as Demi said, to the free state of Florida. We're so grateful you're here. You have a number of people in the room who have been at this for a very, very long time. These are legislators and staffers, leaders. You're going to hear from Steve in just a minute. My name is Bob McClure, and I'm the president and CEO of the James Madison Institute, which is Florida's free market think tank. And we are grateful to Lisa and to ALEC and all of your team for all you're doing and for being here in the Sunshine State. And so I also want to introduce, and Steve can introduce himself, Steve Crisafulli, who was a former Speaker of the House in 2014, from 2014 to 2016, and looking forward to hearing more from you.
No, thanks. And welcome to Florida. Thank you for having me. You know, the last time I was at ALEC was in 2012, and I think we were in a ballroom on the side of Bourbon Street in North Carolina or in New Orleans that sat probably about 200 people. So to see the amount of engagement here this week is impressive. So congratulations to the team at ALEC. Congratulations to Chair Basada on all of y'all's efforts and your successes and continuing to grow this organization. It makes a difference. I'll tell you, I just left from South Florida. We had RSLC. I have the great pleasure of chairing that organization. And we had about 800 people show up for that event. And I will tell you, the energy is there for what's coming up in November, and continuing this message, as Demi was saying, of free principles and being committed to small government is paying off in the states. And I will tell you, I think in November we will see successes from that. So look forward to speaking with y'all today.
I also want to acknowledge my staff, who is also here from the James Madison Institute. Just briefly raise your hand if you're with the JMI team, and thank you all for that. And if you want to learn more about the great state of Florida, talk to our folks at the James Madison Institute and any one of our fabulous legislators who are in the room. Speaker, let's go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about this. You were Speaker of the House from 2014 to 2016. And a lot of people think that Florida has become the free state of Florida, like it's an overnight success. But we know, all of us, that that's not true. When you became Speaker, moving forward to today, how has the state changed, and how have we gotten to be where we are today?
It's a good question, Bob. And I think, what's important to recognize coming into 2014-16 is we were coming out of the Great Recession. And there were tough decisions that were made by leaders well before me. And those same decisions have been made by leaders after me. But one thing stands true, and it's the philosophy of what the leaders in Florida have come to. And it's fiscal discipline, limited government, and focusing on the people of the state and recognizing that government is not the answer. And, we've got a great contingent of Florida legislators here today. And, there's been tough decisions that they've had to make. They're going to continue to make tough decisions. But what we knew in 2014-16 is we had to stand firm on those principles. There were going to be things that would come before us that would tempt us to go after additional federal money or whatever it might be with Medicaid expansion or something along those lines. And the reality was, my first budget that I voted for in the legislature when I was a freshman member was cutting the budget by $6 billion. That's with a B. We went from a $78 billion budget to a $72 billion budget because we didn't have the means to continue to spend like we were because of what we were going through. And what we found was there were no negative impacts to the state. And we stayed focused on those disciplines throughout my speakership and the speakerships to follow. And that's why Florida is set where it is today, because of the philosophy that we believe that we should govern on.
I'll say this as well. We at the James Madison Institute don't by and large hire, quote, politicians, end quote, to work with us at JMI. But this speaker, as you just heard, is a movement conservative. And I think that's what's critically important. And that's why he's a scholar in residence with the James Madison Institute. We've cut our budget 3 years in a row. The governor has referenced that. It's, in a state of 23 million plus. Our budget's about where New York City is, a little bit more. New York City's a city of 8 million. As we move into other issues beyond just government spending, election reform, for example, we're very familiar with what happened with Bush v. Gore. We were all there. We were the butt of every joke, the humiliation of the country, hanging chads. We all know that. Fast forward to our most recent election. We have almost 1,000 people moving here a day, 2 different time zones, 23 million people. Every demographic in the country is in the state, reflected in the state of Florida. And yet we know by 10 p.m., maybe midnight, who's won every race up and down the ballot in our state. How did we go from Bush v. Gore, and then during your time as speaker, what did you do that was significantly important to the success of where we are today?
Well, Bob, I'll tell you, it was the 2003 session, I believe, that changed Florida's, elections for the good for years to come. And thankfully, Jeb Bush recognized the challenges we had. And the reality is, it was a statewide voter registration. It was optical scan ballots and making sure that we had a process set up to audit those ballots post-election. It was making sure we had professional staff that were, educated and understood the process. We extended voting for early voting. I mean, right now in Florida, we have early voting that leads up to the elections where a lot of people take part in that. And I don't mean mail-in ballots. I mean showing up places to actually vote. And it takes the pressures off of election day. But along with that, the crazy thing is we have to show our ID when we go and vote. Now, that was in place before 2003, but they made those standards a little stricter with signature, verification, and then making sure that IDs were validated. So, encompassing all of that and moving forward today, you're right. I mean, by, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, we go to bed knowing who we voted for versus, California that are weeks later. So, there are states around this country that could learn from what Florida's successes have been.
Yeah, and I would add this as well. Since we've instituted these reforms, when the left loves to say that somehow this is Jim Crow 2.0, actually, it has increased voter turnout across the state and increased voter turnout among African Americans and Hispanics and underserved communities. So don't let the left tell you otherwise. It works. Florida has, shifting now to tax policy and a little bit more on spending, Florida has no state income tax. And I know a lot of states in this room who are represented are trying to move to either lower state income tax or no state income tax. It's a friendly competition, I think, in a lot of states that border one another. You compare that to, say, a New York, an Illinois, a California. How has Florida, with the legislative process, been able to govern, continue to cut spending, to make tough decisions, as you said, during the 08-09, crisis? What advice would you give legislators and leaders in various states on how we've been able to do those things, given our relatively very light tax policy?
Sure. I think consistency and predictability is what, business around the country look for. And with those two things alone, you will see capital follow along. And I believe in Florida, That's what we've done. As I've said, the consistency of leadership in Florida, and we're unique to some degree. We have term limits, so every 2 years we've got a new speaker in the House or a new president in the Senate, and we are still able to maintain the consistency and predictability that businesses are looking for. And that's why you're seeing at record paces, businesses coming into the state. And as you mentioned, a population that continues to grow each and every year. When I came into office, I think we were bringing in 600 people or so a day. Up until last year, I think we were about 1,600 people a day coming to this state. And they're looking for those policies, and they're looking for the consistency that we bring in those policies. And I think that other states, if they're looking for those opportunities, it's that predictability that I think that families as well as businesses are looking for, along with, yes, we have great advantages of a geographic location. We've got a great climate. We've got a great school system. We talked about school choice and what we've done in Florida over the last several years with school choice, but that's been something that we've been paving the way on for many years. And because of that, we have families that are looking to be here to take advantage of those opportunities. And look no further than COVID and the people that came to the state to have an opportunity to continue to educate their kids while other states were shut down. And because of these reforms and because of the consistency in our leadership, we've been able to build on that.
Given that success, I would say almost generational success, Florida is slated to pick up 3 to 4 more electoral votes in the 2030 census. Yes. States that value freedom, as the speaker said, that value capital, that's where you're seeing the electoral votes, where you're going to see them in 2030. They're moving to states like Florida and Texas and Utah and South Carolina. They're moving away from New York and Illinois and California. We've all heard the term live free or die. Americans are choosing to live free or move, and that's the truth. Speaker, moving on to the next question. We're told that Washington, D.C. cannot impose fiscal discipline on itself, and yet we've done it in Florida. Can you give an example of maybe a time where it was hard to say no, where you had to make the really tough decisions, and yet Florida still continues to become more and more a red state? We're not losing, elections because of it. Talk about how Washington at the congressional level can emulate the tough decisions when things get difficult.
Well, the beauty of Florida is we do have a balanced budget, and that's where we have to start, and that's just the reality of the situation. But I will tell you, as a leader, as even some of the legislators sitting in this room that are appropriations chairs and the subcommittees and in the big committees, it's there's a lot of times where you have to say no. There's a lot of times a legislator will walk in and say, this is the only way I can get reelected. But the reality is we have to be disciplined in our spending. And I will, without naming names, I will tell you, I had a legislator that came in and asked for a $50 million appropriation. Now, in 2014, that was a big deal. In 2026, it's still a big deal. But the reality was she felt like it would get her unelected if she didn't bring this home. And, I just kind of kept preaching to her that it's the message that you go to the door with that gets you reelected, not the money you bring back to your district. But the reality was, it was the end all be all for her and several folks in the delegation, but we had to stay focused. And I was a small business guy. I mean, I looked at ROI before I did anything. The first bill I ever ran was scoring legislative appropriations, because that's what we do in a daily, activity in our family business back at home. So recognizing that we had to have ROI in our expenditures was important to me. And at the end of the day, saying no can be difficult, but you have to live within your means. The fiscal discipline is what got Florida to where it is today. It'll get Florida to where it goes in the future. And while sometimes it's not the popular thing to do to say no, it is the right thing, and that's just the reality sometimes in leadership.
We have a saying at the James Madison Institute that good policy is good politics. And what we mean by that is if you implement what the speaker is talking about from a policy standpoint, the opportunity to get elected or reelected becomes easier. It still takes your hard work. And I'll add this one more thing as it relates to that issue. During COVID, you remember that our governor was the first state in the country to reopen, and our legislature and our leaders in the state supported him on this issue under withering criticism. And obviously he's been vindicated. But it takes that kind of courage to advance good policy. And when you do that, it also is good politics. And that's exactly what the speaker's talking about as well when it comes to spending. What's the connection, kind of in your view, Speaker, between the limited government approach and the economic growth we've seen in Florida? A lot of people say, as you said, that $50 billion appropriation, what's the connection between limiting government and economic growth? Are they cause and effect? Is Florida just lucky? Are we importing money? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it goes hand in hand. And as I mentioned, yes, we have great advantages with our geography, with our climate, but so does California. Admittedly, I was out there a couple of weeks ago, and I think the weather and the coastline are beautiful, but the politics are horrific. And I think we recognize that, and it's because of failed leadership and failed decisions and the inability to be fiscally constrained and focused on what makes your state great. And again, as I've said, and can't say it enough, the consistency in the policies in Florida and the consistency in the leadership allows you to balance that out and focus on what it means to continue to advance Florida in the direction that we have. And those tax policies that we speak of, I mean, we used to have annually, we would vote on tax policies that we would renew each and every year. Now those are built into the budget as reoccurring funding. And we've done that because we've been able to slowly chip away at making sure that we know what's important to our citizens in the state. We know what's important to the business sectors, and we've been able to do that through consistency in our policy making.
With all the great things that are happening, what do you see potentially as the biggest threat to our freedom in the state of Florida? And obviously using that as a potential warning for other states as well.
Well, I think it's getting off track and losing focus or seeing a shiny object that looks, inviting. And, for me, that was Medicaid expansion. Washington, D.C. was touting that, pushing it down to the states. And, we just weren't having it in Florida. We did not see that was something that we needed to do. And thank God we didn't. It would have put us in a different fiscal environment for years to follow. Truth is, I gavelled out a session early because my counterpart in the Senate at the time wanted to expand Medicaid. And we weren't able to go any further in the legislative session. We couldn't talk about allocations for our budget process. And I just made the decision that was the thing to do, was separate ourselves from this conversation, go back home, talk to our constituents, find out what's important to them, come back in Tallahassee and pass a budget. And the reality was we just weren't distracted by the outside forces. And at the time, that was additional money to go into a healthcare budget that we just did not need. And again, when we look in the rearview mirror, we see that we made the right decision.
As we kind of begin to wrap up this conversation, I like to tell folks on a national level, yes, the Republican Party kind of owns everything in the state of Florida. Obviously, it hadn't been that way forever. It took 30 years to become an overnight success. But what I also like to say is, and I've used this term already, is that the leaders in this room, the men and women who have led this state, they're movement conservatives. They're not Republicans per se. Clearly they are. But there is a movement conservatism that has really began kind of with Jeb Bush and all the fights we had early on with Jeb as governor. So obviously the Republican component is incredibly important, but it's movement conservative leadership. As we wrap up this conversation today, if a legislator from another state came to you tomorrow and said, hey, I want what Florida has, what would you tell them?
I'll go back to where I started. It's the philosophies of the leadership of our state. I wouldn't go look at our statutes. I would look at our philosophies, and I would base what's right for your state off of those philosophies. Limited government, fiscal discipline, brings you a long way in this world. And again, not everybody has the advantages of, the geography that I spoke of or the climate that I speak of, but you can certainly entrench those fiscal disciplines into a caucus and continue to build off of them. And I truly believe, based on the successes of Florida, that those are places that other states can build their successes off of as well.
Let us not forget that the left loves to say that the more and more diverse a state becomes, it will be naturally more blue. Florida gives the lie to that, given our demographics, our leadership, and our leadership in this room. Mr. Speaker, any final thoughts or comments for everyone here at ALEC?
No, thank you for having me again. I think it's a great conversation. It's certainly what this organization is built on, is the philosophies of smaller government, fiscal discipline, and the realities of today. We need to make sure, and I say this everywhere I go now, it used to be that the policies drove the politics. We're seeing more and more that politics are driving policies, and I think that becomes a very dangerous area, because we're trying to look at a populist approach, or we're trying to appease a different group of people. Just remember the foundation of where we come from and how we got to where we are with the successes we've had. And you don't have to look any further than that to realize that the philosophy that this organization is built on is one of success for many states around this country.
And if we at the James Madison Institute can ever be of service to you in your state, please reach out. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
Please welcome back to the stage ALEC National Chairman, Florida Representative Demi Basada.
Thank you so much. That type of insight reminds us all why we come back to ALEC year after year. Thank you, Bob, and the entire team at the James Madison Institute for your support. We appreciate it. Before we enjoy lunch, I want to take a moment to give a thank you to a very hard-working team. Some of you remember we were here 3 years ago at this very exact property, and the staff here has been unbelievable to work with. We don't find that everywhere we go. Every time we have an ALEC annual meeting, it's not always as easy as it is here at the JW Marriott Grand Lakes. And they're not sponsoring this message, okay? This is a genuine thank you to the entire team. So if we could give a big round of applause to the unbelievable staff at this property. Thank you so much. And I'd like everyone to go ahead and enjoy their lunch, and we'll be back with more.
Please welcome to the stage ALEC Chief Executive Officer, Lisa B. Nelson.
All right. Hello. How are you? Everybody good? Yeah. Well, it is my privilege to bring you up to speed on all the great things that we are doing at ALEC. What a year it has been, and it's only July. We celebrated 19 years of Rich States, Poor States, the ALEC Laffer State Economic Index of Competitiveness, the most trusted guide to economic competitiveness in America, and it's still changing the way states compete for jobs, families, and the future. We've taken direct aim at waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid, an issue that drains resources away from the very people the program is supposed to serve. Through model policy and legislative support, ALEC has helped states tighten eligibility, verification, strengthen program integrity, and ensure that taxpayer dollars go to the vulnerable Americans who truly need them, not to the fraud and mismanagement. And nowhere has the fight against waste been more visible than right here in the Sunshine State. Under this state's legislative leadership, the Florida Department of Government Efficiency has already returned $878 million of unused federal dollars back to the Treasury and uncovered an eye-popping abuses in local government spending along the way. Florida is a model other states are already starting to copy, and exactly the kind of accountability that ALEC is always looking for. We've kept up the fight on election integrity because free markets and federalism don't mean much if people can't trust the ballot box. Through our Process and Procedures Task Force, ALEC members have advanced model policies on voter ID, citizenship, verification, and cleaning up the voter rolls. And of course, education. It remains and always will be at the heart of what we do at ALEC. This year, we've watched the education freedom take root in new states, watched families gain new options, and watched ALEC model policies turn into real and lasting change for children across the country. Which brings me to someone whose career has been devoted to that exact mission. We've been talking about it at our lunch table. Erica Donalds has been a part of the ALEC family for a long time. And I mean that personally, not just professionally. She's someone I consider a true friend of the organization. She serves on our Education and Workforce Development Task Force. She's been a driving force on our Education Freedom Alliance calls, all for the last 2 years, calls that matter more than people realize because of where the state chapters and reformers on the ground compare notes, troubleshoot, and the next fight, and keep each other sharp at annual meetings. Erica has also worked hand in hand with ALEC on model policy, including our Inclusive College Savings Plan Act. The act follows the same philosophy behind the One Big Beautiful Bill, and it's doubling of the 529 K-12 withdrawal. We were just talking about it at the table. It lets dollars follow the child so that every family, not just ones with resources, can find the learning environment that actually works for their child. It's a policy that reflects exactly how Erica thinks. How do we take a good idea, make sure that every family, not just the ones who already have the resources, can take advantage of this? And so far, 30 states have opted into the Education Tax Freedom Credit Scholarship Program. If your state is one of those that has yet to sign on, this meeting is the place to fix that. The ALEC team is on hand all week to walk you through exactly how to bring that essential program back to families at home. Erica is the founder of Optima Foundation, she chairs the Center for Education Opportunity at the America First Policy Institute, and she has spent decades in the trenches, on school boards, in state houses, in living rooms with parents, fighting for the simple idea that every child deserves a school that works for them. And let's be honest about something else. Florida is the #1 state in the country for education freedom today because of people like Erica Donalds. This did not happen by accident. It happened because people like her refused to accept the status quo. Now, I don't think it's any secret where Erica's story might be headed next. Florida may soon be looking at its new First Lady. And if that day comes, this state and this country will be lucky to have her message reach even further than it already has. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Erica Donalds.
Thank you. Florida, you're the best. Thank you, ALEC. Thank you, Lisa. All of you, this incredible organization. It's been truly an honor to be a part of it for so many years. And we have moved the ball forward because of the collaboration and the coming together of great minds behind education policies from all different states. Even if your state hasn't been able to accomplish what Florida has, the fact that we're working together to drive every single state as far as they possibly can to give education freedom to as many families as possible, it is exponential across this country. And we are at a pivotal moment right now. I know you've all heard about the Education Freedom Tax Credit. I was talking to you about it in Texas as well at the last meeting. I'm not going to stop talking about it. And that has given us a platform from which to create an education freedom economy across this country that will allow not just for families to be able to access education options within their communities, but it will drive innovation into the education sector, something that we have never really seen when it comes to parent-directed funding. Some of you know my story. I got into this by happenstance. I spent 20 years in the investment management industry, but before I'm Byron's wife and before I'm a former school board member and an executive, I am a mom of 3 boys. And what I found out, like probably many of you, when I made a school choice decision by buying a house in the area I wanted my kids to go to school, that an A school, even the best performing school that money can buy when you buy a home in that community, it doesn't mean it's an A school for every child. And it wasn't an A school for all 3 of my children. And when I had to pull my son out, I discovered the concept of school choice because I didn't have it. And I finally found a school, and at the time we had to put it on our credit card, but I said I would rather go in debt than have my son hate learning every day. It turned his life around completely. He went from crying and not wanting to go to school every day to jumping in the car, excited to tell me about everything he had learned. He's never been on medication like the public school wanted me to do. He's never been in a special classroom, but he graduated with honors. He got multiple scholarship offers, and now he's in the middle of a great college career playing basketball and living his dream. But let me tell you, there are hundreds of thousands of Darrens out there in every one of your states that hate going to school. They hate learning. Therefore, they are not learning. They are not going to be able to achieve the American dream unless we give them and their families and their parents access to the education option that works for them. And where we are in America right now, what we know about education and how transformative school choice is for these families, there's no excuse. There's no excuse for every one of these red-controlled states, and even those with close ties. We should be providing that option universally, formula funded to every single child. Let me tell you why it's so important that not just Florida or Arizona or a large program in Texas do this. What our foundation has just launched, called the Education Freedom Accelerator, it will do two things. Starting with the federal tax credit, which is surprisingly one of the more flexible programs in the country in terms of what expenses are allowed under that program. When those rules are out, we're going to take that framework of educational expenses that should be allowed for an ESA platform, and we're going to go to every one of your states that has school choice programs and say, we would like you to align your allowable expenses with the federal program, probably meaning expanding it a bit. We're going to define what those expenses are. We're going to defend why those expenses should be allowed with research. So we're going to help you, and I'm in partnership with ALEC as well, to give you the information you need to combat the people who say you shouldn't be able to spend money on that as a parent. One of the things I've always wanted to do is take all the school district expenses, put it in a large database and say, this is what parents can spend money on. I think that would be quite flexible for our families. So it's not just enough then for a family to have a federal tax credit scholarship, or to have an ESA, or to have a 529, which rules will also be coming out for them to have ESA style expenses. If I want to spend those funds, I don't want to have to go to 3 different places to see what tuition it can pay, what expenses can I use it on, go to the 529, get a cashier's check, take it over here. I need innovators to be able to take all those funds, put it in one dashboard. As a parent, I see all of those funds stacked together, and I know that's the total amount I have to spend on all of these allowable expenses. And in order to do that and to invite those innovators in to create that technology, we need a wide market of those stackable expenses, not just in Florida. It's not going to work if it's just us. We need all of you. But we're not going to stop there, because I am an education service provider here in Florida. And in order to get our world's first virtual reality school, which is now serving 1,800 students this fall, Optima Academy Online, to get approved in Florida, we had to fill out a 400-page charter application, a 900-page state application. We had to go through a 2-year accreditation process with an international accreditor, and we operated for 4 years with outstanding results. So what happened when we go to Texas's brand new program that opened with $1 billion for families? They said, oh, you've done all this, come on in. No, it was as if we had done none of that. We had to start completely from scratch. So what we need across all of your states is provider reciprocity. If you get approved in one state, you are approved in all of the school choice states, in all of the programs. So that on the provider side, on the innovator side, I know that if I have a great idea that's going to help kids, I have a choice of all these states to choose from, to start in, to expand to, and to allow more families to access my program. This bringing together of the allowable expenses, of the provider requirements, of the multiple programs, up and down, federal, state, local, all of those available dollars stacked together, all of the expenses aligned, all of the provider requirements agreed upon across states. That is how we will build the education freedom economy that invites innovation, it invites investment, it invites philanthropy, and the result will be more access, better results, academic excellence, and frankly, what we're all here for, the achievement of the American dream for every single one of our students in every single one of our states. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all of your great work. Thank you for supporting education freedom.
Please welcome back to the stage ALEC Chief Executive Officer Lisa B. Nelson.
Thank you so much, Erica. I can't wait to see that swearing in of your husband and the next governor of Florida. Really, really excited. Our next guest needs very little introduction to this crowd. Hugh Hewitt is one of the most recognized voices in America media today. A nationally syndicated radio host, an author, law professor who has spent decades covering the issues that matter most to the people in this room. He has been a friend of ALEC's for years, a regular voice at our annual meetings and our States and Nations Policy Summits, always ready to bring his signature wit, mix of insight and history to the table. And sometimes a healthy dose of whatever the issue of the day happens to be. In fact, if you want a regular dose of that insight, Hugh sits down every week with our very own Jonathan Williams and talks about what are the issues in the states, what's happening. They have their regular segment every week. This week, Hugh is doing more than just sitting down with Jonathan. He is anchoring our Radio Row by hosting his shock show straight here at the ALEC meeting. He will be sitting down with legislators, I think, all day tomorrow, or maybe even starting this afternoon and then all day tomorrow. So we're looking forward to that. Please join me in welcoming Hugh Hewitt to the stage.
I thought Lisa liked me, and then she had me speak after the future First Lady of Florida, and that's no longer true, Lisa, because that's a tough act to follow, Ms. Donalds. It's going to be great to come back to Florida when, in fact, you're in Tallahassee. I learned, this is why I love coming to ALEC. In the course of the last hour and a half since I got here, I've learned about 20 different things that I didn't know, because everybody in this room is an expert about something, and I always ask questions about everything. Let me start, though. I learned about Matt Commons, who I may embarrass now. State Representative Matt Commons, Indiana. Where are you, Matt? Over there. He is a veteran of our Afghan war. He's a wounded warrior, and he is serving on your Veterans Affairs Committee. So could he and every other veteran please stand up? I stand in line with Matt and Leah Beebe, and we were talking about various states and the policies that they adopt for their veterans, for their disabled veterans, both education tax credits, property tax relief, the sorts of things that you never hear about, but that states do better than the federal government. Then I sit down next to Erica, and I learn all about the global goal, which is every dollar that a parent spends on education, they should be able to get to direct. And I think that is a fabulous policy goal, and I will be talking to people throughout the day. In fact, these are my 2 easiest days of broadcast of the year. There are 15 segments in a 3-hour broadcast show. We're on the Salem News Channel, Salem Radio Network, a few hundred stations across the country, and it's easy because I have to do very little preparation. All the 12 guests show up. They're loaded and ready for bear to talk about what's going on in their state. And usually there's a lot to talk about. Now, I am experienced in the states. I grew up in Ohio, but I moved immediately after that to California, after Massachusetts, after Michigan, then to Virginia, then to New York. All I've done is live in blue states. So all I want to do is get to a red state eventually. Ohio was blue when I grew up, now it's red. I want to get to a red state where they're doing red things, or at least a state that's in transition. Lisa and Jonathan and I, we all live in poor old Virginia, where we had a great governor and great momentum, and we've gone way backwards in a hurry, but we'll turn that around, I hope. I hope that the example that is set by states that gain population, gain wealth, gain jobs, gain future is enough to drive other states to eventually capitulate to common sense. That's my goal, is to make states capitulate to common sense. Now, in my other life, I am a law professor. And I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes telling you the good news, because I have to redo. Every year I've been teaching since 1995, constitutional law. And I'm not going to ask the lawyers to stand up. You might not get out of here. They're not really talking. I know there are a bunch of lawyers here. If you remember law school, the worst part of constitutional law is the 11th Amendment about when you can sue a state, and the Dormant Commerce Clause about when the federal government gets to push around states and when states can push back. In the last 5 years at the United States Supreme Court, since the court went to a originalist majority. State after state wins at least once a year. This past year, in Little Peacocks in Idaho, from Idaho, and West Virginia versus BPJ, states were confirmed in their authority over Scholastic High School statute, rules, and regulations. That's a big win for the states. It's a big win for common sense in America. 2 years ago, in Oklahoma versus EPA, that allowed states to sue the federal government in the circuit jurisdiction that is closest to them. So if the federal government is messing with you in Oklahoma, you can sue in the circuit closest to or including Oklahoma. If they're messing with you in Ohio or Illinois or Indiana, you can go to the 6th or the 7th Circuit and sue there. You don't have to go to the District of Columbia. You don't have to deal with the most, not maybe the most, at least equal to the most liberal jurisdiction in America. You get to sue them in the right place. 3 years ago, United States versus Scrimeti. That's about healthcare for minors who are experiencing gender dysphoria. Tennessee decided it would legislate in that area, and the Supreme Court upheld its right to legislate in that area. Go back another year, Loper Bright versus Raimondo. That's about when the federal government can come in and screw your small businesses by virtue of simply dictating via federal regulation what's in their best interest. And the granddaddy of them all, which is skipping a year, West Virginia versus EPA, that is the biggest one that pushed the EPA back on its heels. Now, I have in the last month had on both EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin for a half-hour conversation about what they're doing, and Secretary of the Interior Doug Burgum. What they're both trying to do is make you more empowered to do what you know is best for your states. Whether it is in terms of controlling your clean air and your clean water, you know better than the states. Whether it's in terms of controlling your natural resources or what is or isn't an endangered species, they know that you know what is best for your states, and they're committed to it. In fact, I think the next 2 years, no matter what happens in the midterms, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second, no matter what happens in the midterm, this is the best time ever in my 31 years of teaching common law to be a state legislator. Because when you push back, when you pass laws that reflect the values and the goals of your states, the federal courts are instructed to honor the choices of the states. I also come to ALEC because my information is always out of date. In fact, today I checked on ChatGPT because I wanted to find out how many states had already joined in Senator Cruz and Donald Trump's initiative that I learned that Ms. Donalds was also involved in to get the ability of states to have a $1,700 tax credit. ChatGPT thinks it's 27. Lisa just told me it's 30. So you're ahead of ChatGPT, Lisa Nelson, and that is a big deal. Now, I also heard up here, and I'm going to be asking a lot of my guests, the biggest story of the news cycle, and I always have to know what the story of the news cycle is of course the war in Iran, but the second biggest story in the news cycle is voting integrity in New Jersey. Now, 3 years ago, is Robert here? There you are. 3 years ago, Bob Othman and I sat in the Newark airport. I stayed overnight. He went home and came back because thunderstorms had collided with my plans to move here, to come down here for 2 days. And Bob and I were talking about New Jersey and what a lost and hopeless case it was. And he's in there fighting it off. Good to see you, Robert. And we exchange emails every now and then. Lee Abid is from New Jersey. He always tells me New Jersey isn't lost. But you watch enough Sopranos and you think it's lost. And I found yesterday, I was amazed. Mickey Sherrill, one of the moderate Democrats who's not moderate, was obliged by the facts to stand up and say, oops, 6,600 migrants to this state were also issued not just their driver's license, but were registered to vote, and at least 600 of them voted. Now, it doesn't mean material fraud. It just means, as I have written books about, there is fraud in every election. Every single election. 2004, I wrote the book, If It's Not Close, They Can't Cheat. Fraud is in the DNA of one of our great parties. We're a nonpartisan organization. I won't tell you which one. Chicago, Boston, Kansas City, there are machines. And there is fraud in California. Now, I lived almost 30 years of my 70 in the Golden State. And whereas California has turned out 16 consecutive years of one-party rule, under very left-wing governors Jerry Brown and Gavin Newsom, Florida keeps winning the lotto. And you go from Jeb Bush to Rick Scott to Ron DeSantis, and now you're going to Byron Donalds. That's not even fair to a California. Now, we've moved to Virginia to the Beltway. I thought I'd hit a home run with Glenn Youngkin, and we did. But now we got to deal with Abigail Spanberger. Don't believe when people present themselves as moderate. They're not moderate. They are there to actually do the will of what is California's example. California is now a mess. I raised 3 kids with my wife in wonderful California, and we had great schools. Their out-migration is real, and it's for a reason. My great schools are no longer great schools. My property taxes are no longer capped as they were when I first moved there. The transportation is no longer what it is. The beach is still wonderful, but there are beaches everywhere. I just want to encourage you to continue to study down, whether it's veterans benefits, whether it's education reform, whether it's voter cleanup rolls, whatever it is that you're working on. What we learn every 2 days, I come here every year, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, I learned that there are smart people, incredibly dedicated, doing the very difficult business of actually coming up with the lines and the paragraphs that make a change. Keep those red states getting redder. Let's turn around some of our blue friends and make them at least purple. And Erica Donalds, I sure look forward to your story in about 3 years from now. Thank you very much for having me, ALEC.
Please welcome back to the stage ALEC National Chairman, Florida Representative Demi Basada.
Thank you so much, Hugh. That's exactly why we keep bringing you back. You always manage to make sense of the moment we're in. And thank you to every speaker who joined us today, Bob McClure, Speaker Chris Foley, Erica Donalds, our future First Lady, and Hugh. Thank you to Lisa and the entire team and staff at ALEC. What a way to open this annual meeting. I also want to say a special thank you to our sponsors whose generosity and partnership make this lunch and this entire week possible. We don't take that support for granted, not for a single second. As you head into the rest of today's schedule, keep an eye on your agenda for task force meetings and roundtables and our workshops where you can learn more about data centers, security liability, data privacy, education freedom, election integrity, and so much more. This year, we're excited to launch a special breakout session hosted by our Judiciary Task Force where you can hear insights from task force members and ALEC experts on all the landmark SCOTUS cases from the past year. A quick reminder, tonight's welcome reception kicks off at 5 p.m. sharp this evening. Get there a few minutes early, grab a drink, because the moment it starts, you'll be glad you didn't miss the opening. And you can do that in between your runs to the lazy river, I promise. Thank you all again for being here. Let's make this a week worth remembering for education freedom, for the states, and for this country as we carry the spirit of 250 years of liberty into everything we do this week. Enjoy the rest of your day.